Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's author webinar. Thank you for joining us. I'm Carol, and I'm part of the Learning and Content Management team. Joining me from the Learning and Content Management team today are my colleagues Chandini and Julian, and from our researcher support team, we have Sandhya and Deepak. Before we begin today, just a few housekeeping items. If you have a question at any time during the content of the session, please use the Q&A tab to send your question directly to us. We will try to answer as many questions as possible during the session today directly in the Q&A channel. If we cannot answer all of the questions, we will reply directly to you after the session, unless you post the question anonymously. We'll also cover some of the most frequently asked questions at the end of the session. For the best view, you may wish to drag the central bar on your screen to the right to enlarge the screen that we're sharing. And you may also wish to enable the transcripts, live transcripts via the bar at the bottom of your screen. Finally, our session is being recorded and you'll be sent a link to the recording when that's ready. You may have seen mention of a poll as well, just to let you know, apologies for that we will have a poll at the end of the session today. So there's no poll to answer for now. Okay, so let's take a look at our agenda for today. Okay, so firstly, we will start by giving you an overview of the author's submission process in Editorial Manager. Please note that the steps here may vary depending on journal configuration and the type of article being submitted. We will then have a look at how to use the declaration tool when submitting a manuscript. Elsevier's declaration tool quickly and easily helps authors to create comprehensive statements, which incorporates the ICMJE, that's the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, declaration standards. This declaration tool will produce a statement in Word form that can then be uploaded alongside your manuscript and will appear in your published article. We will provide you a brief explanation of the various editorial statuses that your submission may progress through in Editorial Manager. And then finally, we will provide some information on co-authorship verification. Okay, so now let's move over to Editorial Manager, to our training site, and we'll explore the author's submission process. Please note that I'm going to be using our training site for the demonstration with test users and test submissions. The training site is a good replica of the live environment, but it may look slightly different to your own profile and your own journal. So don't worry if you don't see things today that you usually see when you log into your profile. This might be due to the rights and permissions granted for each role, which can vary from journal to journal. Okay, so just one moment and I'll move across to our training site. Okay, Chandini, could I just get you to confirm, can you see my Editorial Manager site?
Yes, Carol, all fine.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Great. Okay, so as I said, this is our training site that we'll use today. When you come to your own journal site, you'll see the cover image of your journal on the left here, and also the title of the journal will be in the banner at the top of the screen. If you're a new user and you're coming to the site for the first time, then you'll need to register an account with the journal. To do this, you just need to follow this register now link here in the middle of the screen. And then you can enter your details and register your account. If you're already a registered user and you'd like to retrieve your username or password, if you've forgotten either of those, you can do this by clicking on Send Login Details, and then you'll just need to enter your email address. If the system finds a matching email address, then it will send you an email which will provide you with a link to update your password, and that link will also that email will also contain your username. Once you're on the main menu, you can also use the Update My Information tab, which we'll see in a moment. But for now, we've already got our username and password entered here, so I'm just going to go ahead and log in to this site as an author. So I'll click on the Author Login button. Okay, and that will just bring us to our author main menu. The first thing to just note here as well, that once you're actually logged in, if you need to update any of your details within your profile, so for example, if you've changed institutions, something like that, you can do that just by clicking on your name at the top right of the screen here. And you'll see the little drop down and your username will be here, your role. So for example, if you are also a reviewer for a journal or an editor, you can also change your role here. So you're logged in as that particular role. But via this update my information link just here, this is where you can update any of your details. So for example, your institution. It's not required that you create a new Editorial Manager account if you do change any details. So just to avoid duplicating accounts, you can use that update my information link just there. Okay, so from your author main menu, then you'll see a lot of useful information. Firstly, just to mention on the right here, you'll see links to some useful resources. For any upcoming author webinars will be listed here, and you can directly register to join one of those. You'll see links to our author video guides and supporting articles, so you can go directly to those by clicking on the link. And then other resources as well, so things like the user guide for authors, information on open access, and so on. You can access all of that information from the right of the screen here. There's also various options at the top of the screen. But the first thing to mention before you actually begin the submission process, it's really important that you check the journal requirements for submitting. So you can do that by clicking on the About button just here in the menu bar, and then you'll find the link to the instructions for authors. This is sometimes known as the Guide for Authors as well. And that will bring you directly to the Guide for Authors for your journal. And from there, you will see full details on the submission requirements for your journal. So this will include information like manuscript word counts, any file requirements for different article types, and any other important information for your submission. So please do familiarize yourself with that information before you begin submitting. Okay, so then once you are ready to begin submitting a new submission, you can do that by clicking on this Submit New Manuscript button just here. So we will go ahead and do that. You can ignore this. This is just if you have any incomplete submissions that you've already begun. If you have already started the submission and you want to go back and continue with that, you can just find the relevant paper and click Select and Continue. Otherwise, as in this case, we'll click on No, Start New Manuscript. Okay. So the first step when you do that is to select the article type. So you just need to, from the drop-down, just choose the appropriate article type for your submission. If you are submitting to a special issue, then please ensure that you select the appropriate special issue article type from the drop-down. So for example, it might say special issue and then have colon and the title of the special issue. That's important just to ensure that your paper goes directly to the appropriate editor. So we'll just choose full-length article. Once you've chosen the article type, the journal may also ask you to link to your ORCID record. This is usually an optional step, so you can choose to link to your ORCID ID, or you can go ahead and proceed without that for the moment. So we will click on Proceed. Okay. So along the top of the screen then, I just wanted to point out these are each of the steps that you'll go through in the submission process. Once you've completed a step and you've entered all the required information, you'll see a green tick appearing. So for us, we've just completed that first step on choosing the article type. If you've got a blue circle with a downwards pointing arrow, that lets you know that is the step that you're currently looking at. So we're currently at the Attach Files step. If you want to move to a different step, you can click directly on there and you can skip forwards to that point and move back without having to use the back button or the proceed buttons at the bottom of the screen. And if any information is missing within a particular step in the process, then you'll see a red icon appearing here. So you'll have to come back and complete that step before you can proceed with the submission. Okay, so from the Attach Files step, from here you can attach all the files that you wish to include with your submission. You can use the browse button here, or you can also drag and drop files from your computer for the primary file for your submission. So I'm just going to browse and I'll just find a file from my desktop. Apologies. Okay, so we will just choose a manuscript file first of all, just to use that, have our first manuscript file appearing. So this is the first file we've just uploaded here, and it's now appearing automatically here as the manuscript file. You can drag and drop files, as I said, or you can browse and upload the files individually as well if you wish. From the item type drop down here, and also from here as well, you can see any files that are required for submission will have an asterisk next to them. So there might be several file types that are a requirement when you're submitting your manuscript. So you'll always, of course, the manuscript file will be required, but you might also have to upload a cover letter. In this case, a declaration of interest is required, and there may be other requirements as well, depending on the configuration of your journal and the article type that you've chosen. So we'll upload, because we need to upload a declaration of interest. I'll just choose that item type, and then I'll just quickly find my declaration of interest and just add that in as well. Okay, so we can see that's now appearing in the list here as well. So firstly, as we've already seen, you upload your primary manuscript file, and those mandatory files, as I've said, are indicated with the asterisks next to them. If you select research data, when available, you will be asked to enter the URL where your data is hosted and provide additional information, such as things like the repository name and the title of the data set. In the future, this will become possible to upload data directly into Mendeley data. For some journals, and a question we often get asked is about cover letters and the requirements for cover letters. For some journals, a cover letter is mandatory. For others, it's often just an option. A cover letter is a simple, brief business letter designed to introduce your manuscript to a prospective editor. If the guide for authors for your journal doesn't specify what to include in your cover letter, you may wish to include some details like the following. So you might want to specify any special considerations that should be given to your paper, if any exist. You may wish to provide a brief background regarding the research involved or how the data was collected. You might want to include some details of any previous or concurrent submissions that you have. It's also useful to provide the editor-in-chief with any information that will support your submission. So, for example, any original or confirmatory data or information on the relevance or topicality of your submission. So as I said, that will all appear there for your cover letter. So they're just things you may wish to include within your cover letter. So when you're uploading your files, please ensure that you choose the appropriate file type from the dropdown. And you can also edit the description. So we can see here it's automatically pulling in this information for the description. But for example, if you've got multiple figures that you're uploading, you might want to label them figure 1, figure 2, and so on. The system will automatically order your files into the order designated by the journal. However, for things like figures, if it's for any reason, if it's not showing in the correct order, you can drag and drop the file to move it to the correct position, or you can also change the number in the order box here, just to ensure that they're appearing in the correct order, and then just click on Update File Order just to get them appearing in the correct way. For some journals, the declaration of interest, as we can see here, is a mandatory file type, and we will cover this in more detail a little bit later. But in either event, if a statement is required or if it's mandatory it would be from an ethics perspective, and we have a short video on using the declaration tool in Editorial Manager, which will be shared in the chat for you to refer to. Okay, so once all of your files are uploaded and you're ready to go ahead, you can just click on the Proceed button again at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so the next step, which we're now looking at, is the general information step. This step will have different requirements depending on your journal. So you might be asked, as in this case, you may be asked to include the region of origin. So you would just, from the drop-down, just select your region. You may have to choose a section or a category. Again, each journal will have its own requirements here, so you can just choose the appropriate one from the drop-down. You can expand on any of these menus just by clicking the little plus icon here to expand it, and then you can minimize it as well if you need to. If your journal uses classifications, then you'll find them in this step in general information. Usually if a journal has classifications, then this will be a required step. So you'll need to select some classifications relevant to your manuscript. So in this case, we can see this is a required step for this journal, and 3 or more classifications are required. So we'll just click on Add Classifications. And then you can see these open in a new window. And classifications can be displayed in different ways. So sometimes it might just be a long list of terms, or sometimes we can also have what we call a branched list, which we have in this case. So that's where you'll see this little plus icon next to certain terms. So these would be the main term, and then we've got some subterms displayed underneath these. So it's always good to look through the full list. Some journals may have a lot of classifications, but it's important to check through the full list and find those terms that are most relevant to your paper. The classifications are very useful for editors when they're finding suitable reviewers for your paper, because the terms can be matched with reviewers that we already have. So it's really beneficial to you to choose the best terms, because that will make the review process a lot easier for the editors. So you can just choose those terms that are most relevant, select as many as are required, and then click on Add. And then you can obviously go back and add some more, or similarly, if you need to remove a term, you can just tick the box, click Remove. Once you're ready, then you can click on Submit. So we can see that the terms that we've selected are now displayed here. Okay, so then once ready, we will click on Proceed again. Okay, so the next step we see now is the Review Preferences step. Again, depending on the journal's requirements, you'll see different options displayed here. You may have the option to request an editor, as you can see at the top here. If this option does appear here, then it is just a suggestion or your preference. You're not guaranteed that this editor will be handling your paper, but rest assured that the most appropriate editor will always be assigned to handle a particular paper. But if this option is available to you, you can just select the appropriate editor. And then, as I said, it may or may not go to that person, depending on workload and the subject area. You may also have the option to suggest reviewers. For many journals, this is optional. For others, it may not appear at all. So if you don't see this option, don't worry. It's just down to each journal's configuration. But it often is a requirement as well that you may need to suggest 1 or more reviewers. If this is the case, you'll see the details displayed here, and it will let you know how many reviewers are required. So to add a suggested reviewer, you would just click Add Suggested Reviewer. And then you need to enter a minimum of the first name, last institution, and email address. But obviously then you can add further information if you wish. So I'm just going to quickly add one of the people here. Okay, and just add here. And then you'll also have the option to add a reason. So if there's a specific reason why you're suggesting this person, then you can enter that information here as well. If you want to add multiple suggested reviewers, you can click on this icon here. So you will save this person and then add another. Or if you're just adding 1 suggested reviewer, you can just click on the Save button, and it will just then save the information here. You may also see the option to oppose a reviewer. So that's just displayed here. This is always optional if it's shown here, but if there's anyone who you would prefer not to review your submission for any reason, then you can add that person in this opposed reviewer option here. But as I said, these are all suggestions. So this is obviously just something that the editor will see, and then they can decide whether or not to use those suggested reviewers as they see fit. Okay, so now that we've entered that information, we'll go ahead and proceed. Okay, so the next step is the additional information step. Again, you'll see different information here depending on your journal, but this step is usually where you'll see a questionnaire which the journal uses to collect useful information about the submission and about your manuscript. So you need to respond to each of the questions as appropriate. Most of them may be required, so you'll see that in red if the answer is a requirement. So it might be a drop down, you may have a free text field, depending on how the questions are formulated. So you would just tick the relevant box and enter the appropriate answer for each of the questions, and then click on proceed. Okay, you then will see a comments screen appearing. The comments step is usually optional. This is where you can enter any additional comments that you may have for the journal office. These comments won't appear directly in your submission, so it's just information for the editor or editorial office. Again, this is optional, so you don't need to enter something here. We'll go ahead and click on proceed. Okay, so we are now on the final step here, which is the manuscript data step. At this point, the system may automatically pull some of the data from the manuscript file, which we've just attached, to pre-populate certain fields in the manuscript data step. So for example, the full title, this has been pulled from the manuscript file, which I've uploaded in the attach file step. Any required fields are marked with a red asterisk. Even if the information is pulled in, it's still really important that you check and verify all of the data. Or similarly, sometimes it may not, depending on the type of file you upload, or in other situations, this data might not be pulled automatically. That metadata may not appear, so you will need to enter this information manually or just copy and paste from your manuscript. But yes, very important to check through all of that and make sure it's correct. So we can see the title, which we would check. Then you can either click on next, or you can click directly on the little menu bar here just to expand that. So you'll see the abstract, which has again been pulled in from the manuscript file. You'll see information on the keywords. So again, these will be displayed here. There may be a certain number that are required, but that information should all be in your guide for authors. So you can just check through that. And then the authors section is an important one. So this, again, the details of the authors, you will be displayed as the corresponding author, as the person who's actually submitting the paper, and your details will appear here automatically. The other author list from the list should also appear, but it's really important that you do check their details. So this will include obviously their name. You need to ensure that their current contact email address is present and correct, and also their institution. So it's essential that you choose your institution from the drop-down menu. So this will ensure that if you're eligible for any institutional or society discounts, that can help to reduce your article publishing charges for gold open access. So this is an essential step for that. And there is more information available on that one for you. So if you see here, we've got a little red a little red icon here. So this is telling us that some required information is missing. So we will just click on this information here. So this is how you can view all of the relevant information on each of the authors. So this is the corresponding author. So we've got their name. We'll check to confirm their email address is correct. And as I've just mentioned, the institution dropdown here is really important as well. And you can see here there's more information just letting you know about the institution, and just choosing the correct the correct one from the drop down. You'll also see this contributor roles step. So this is a requirement as well. You need to add the role that each author played in the preparation of and submission of the manuscript. So each author, you will need to just tick the relevant boxes next to whatever role they had to play in preparing the manuscript. So then once you've checked through all of this and you're happy with that information, you can save that. And you do need to check through that for each author in the list to ensure that all of that information is correct. You'll also see the authors appearing. Obviously, in this case, we just have one author here, but when you have several authors, it's important to just check the order that they appear as well. And you can reorder that list. So we do get asked sometimes if, as corresponding author, do you have to be the first author? And the answer to that is no, you don't. The corresponding author isn't necessarily the first author. You can reorder that list. So as corresponding author, you'll automatically appear at the top of the list. But if someone else in the list is the first author, you can drag and drop just by clicking on the blue icon here on the left, and you can reorder that list just by dragging and dropping to the appropriate position within the list. So once you've updated all that information and you've checked through there, as I said, it's really important to make sure the co-author email addresses are correct. Co-authors may receive an email notification from the journal, and we have an email about a video about co-author verification, which will be shared to you. The link to that will be shared in the chat section. But it's important just to ensure those emails are correct so that the co-authors can follow those verification steps. When all of the author details are checked and correct, you can then just click on the next drop down just here, the next button, and you'll then be brought onto the funding information step. So for here, you just need to enter the relevant information if you have any funding sources, just to ensure that you're including all of the correct information, just by clicking on the plus button here and entering those details of your funding. Similarly, if there's no funding for the paper, you would just tick the appropriate box. And then once you're ready at this point, the button at the bottom here, at the bottom of the screen here for build PDF for approval is the next step. So we will go ahead and click on that one. Similarly, you'll see we also have the option to save and submit later at any stage in the process as well. Okay. So we are now at the step here where we're just waiting for the PDF of the paper to build. So this is our manuscript at the bottom of the screen here. So depending, excuse me, depending on the size of the files that we've uploaded and that sort of thing, it may take differing amounts of time for the PDF to build. So it shouldn't be too long, but okay, in this case, our PDF is now ready. It can take a little bit longer if we've got some large figures and other files uploaded. So we can see the PDF is now ready. It's very important that you view the PDF of your submission. To view that, you would just click on the View Submission button, and it will then works away and it then downloads a PDF of the submission. So the PDF will contain all of the files that we uploaded in that attach file step, all combined into a single PDF. This is an essential step, a mandatory step. You have to view the PDF before you can submit. And you need to just check through all of that just to ensure that that information is all correct. If any changes are required at this stage, then you'll see the option to click on Edit Submission. Oops, sorry, this page does refresh regularly, so sometimes you are jumped up to the top again. But yeah, you've got this Edit Submission option just here, and you can go back and edit whichever thing needs to be updated. You will also see on the right here, you're asked to accept that you have read the publishing ethics guidelines and also the copyright terms. So clicking directly on both of these will open up those publishing ethics and terms, and you can just read through those before you actually then go ahead down here and tick the I accept box. Then once you're ready, the final step is to just click on Approve Submission. You also, again, may see the option to link with your ORCID ID. So if that happens, you can either update your information, or as I said, you can proceed without the ORCID ID if you wish. So we will just go ahead and do that, and you'll then be asked just to confirm again that you want to approve the submission. So before you click OK, just be certain of that, because at this point the manuscript will then be sent to the journal. So we will click on OK. Okay. That's great. So this paper has now been submitted to the journal. At this point, we have a video on the author submission process overview, which will also be shared in the chat with you as well. So your paper at this point, now that it's with the journal, it's no longer something that you can edit yourself at this point, but we'll just return back to the main menu. So once you have submitted your paper to the journal, you'll find it in the submissions being processed folder. And from there, you can just check in and check the status of that at any stage if you wish. I wanted to just signpost you to some useful resources as well. So from the bottom right of the screen here, you'll see this little question mark icon here. So this will bring up the resource center. And from here, you have options. For example, you can chat with our researcher support team if you're having any technical issues or any questions that you need to raise to assist you in the submission process. You can contact researcher support. You can also click on this link to go to the Journal Article Publishing Support Center. And from here, we've got an author guide, which will give you step-by-step instructions, including video, short video guides as well, on basically the whole process and overview of everything you need to know for submitting your manuscript. So that's via this question mark icon from the Resource Center. Okay. So that was a brief overview of the actual submission process. The next thing I wanted to talk through was how you can use the declaration tool in Editorial Manager. So there is a link to the declaration tool from both directly from the guide for authors for your journal, and also when you're submitting your manuscript from the attach file step as well. You'll also find a link to the declaration tool from there. I've just got it open in another tab here, so I'm just going to click on that. So the declaration tool, as I mentioned, sometimes it is a mandatory file type, again, depending on your journal. So transparent disclosure of potential competing interests is essential to meeting your ethical obligations and also to nurturing trust in science. And Elsevier now offer this declaration tool in Editorial Manager, which can quickly and easily help authors to create a comprehensive statement. And the statement incorporates the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, as I mentioned before, the ICMJE. It incorporates their declaration standards. The statement can be uploaded as a Word document alongside your manuscript. And then, as I said before, this will also appear in your published article as well. So also, I'll just mention again, in case you missed it, the declaration tool can be found from the Guide for Authors, that Instructions for Authors link, or also from the attach file step. Okay, so we're now looking at the declaration tool homepage. Here you can read further information about declaring your interests. So there's lots of useful information here that you can have a read through. And then once you're ready, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see two options here. So you'll see this I have nothing to declare option. It might be that that's relevant to you, in which case you can click on that. Please note, for some journals, the I have nothing to declare button may be present. And again, as I said, it should obviously only be used to directly generate a statement when you're confident that you and your co-authors have nothing to declare. For other journals, this might not be an option. So you can indicate, as we'll see a bit later, you can indicate on each page of the declaration tool that you have nothing to declare. So we'll just go through the process so you can see step by step how this works. So we will go ahead by clicking on Start My Declaration. Okay, so the first step here is the research support for this reported work. So here you would declare any support that you or any of your co-authors have received from certain types of third parties since the initial conception of this research. So it's important to note here that you don't need to list academic institutions or public funding sources from charitable foundations or from government agencies here. You can fill in the details of this support by typing the organization name directly here in the field. You can also add multiple. So once you've entered all of this information, you can then add another funding source. If you have received funding from multiple sources, you can click on this and add the additional sources there as well. You may also need to add who received the support as well. So you'll see here, you can add the corresponding author name, or if it's one of the co-authors, you can add their names as well. If your research didn't receive any additional support that needs to be declared, then you can use the button, which we will see here at the top, to toggle off. So if you didn't receive any additional support, then you can just take that one and then move on to the next step. So we will click on next. Okay. So the next step here that we can see is relevant support outside this reported work. And this from here, you should disclose if you or any of your co-authors have any financial interests or personal relationships related to the subject matter, but not directly related to the manuscript. And the time frame for other support is within the last 3 years. So anything within that time frame needs to be added here. Again, you would fill in the information in the same way, the organization name, the person this applies to, and then you can tick and check any of the boxes that apply. And similarly, you can add additional fields here as well if you've got more than one to declare. And then we'll go ahead and click on the next step. Apologies, sorry. We'll toggle this one off because we're not going to enter anything for this example, but we'll go ahead and click on next. The next step here is the patents and intellectual property step. This allows you to disclose any relevant patents or copyrights licensed to you or to any of your co-authors. Again, enter all of the relevant information here, and you have the option to add any additional patents if needed. If there's nothing to disclose, you can use the toggle button again, as we've seen previously, and then we will click on next. Okay, we are now on the other activities step. This is the final page of the declaration tool, where you can submit any further information that a reader may perceive to have influenced your work in your manuscript. So anything here that's not been covered in the previous pages. So again, once you've filled in any information here, or similarly, so anything here, or similarly use the toggle button, you can then go ahead and click on the review declaration button. Okay, so from here, you'll see that you can just finalize your declaration. So this screen will just summarize all of the information that you've provided. At the bottom, you can click on back at any point if you need to edit any of the information you provided. Once you're happy that everything here is correct, you can then click on the submit and download button. So I'll just do that here. So you'll see then you're given the option to enter your email address. So if you choose to do that, this will save your declaration statement. During the process, if you wanted to save it at any point and come back later, you can choose to do that. You can enter your email address to save your statement, and then when you next come back to it, you will be prompted to enter the code, the one-time passcode, which will be sent to you, and you can then carry on with the declaration. Similarly, at this point, you can enter your email address and you'll get that passcode, and you can then download your declaration. And then at any point in the next 30 days, you can come back and use your passcode to download the declaration again. So within that 30-day window. Alternatively, you can say, no, thanks, I want to download a declaration without saving it. And if you choose to do that, then that declaration will be downloaded to your computer as a Word document, and you can then save that. And that declaration statement, which you either download at this point or via email, you can then upload that in the attach file step, which we've previously seen. So you can just browse and find the relevant file on your computer or drag and drop it and enter that file as your declaration statement. And if you, I mentioned already, but if you did want to view our video on this to find more information, then I think that's already been shared in the chat on using the declaration tool in Editorial Manager. Okay, I'm now just going to move back to our slides for the next step. Okay, Chandini, can you see the slides which I've shared again?
Yes, Carol.
Okay, great, thank you. Oops. Sorry, one moment. Let me just share them in presenter mode. There we go. Okay, so we're now moving on to how you can track your submission. So let me just move to that step. So when you have submitted your paper, you've finished writing your manuscript and it's submitted to the journal. The submission, the system will show the status of the manuscript as manuscript submitted. Then based on the workflow of the journal, the editorial office or the editor will perform a technical check on your manuscript. So they usually check it for things like the word count, the format and figure quality and so on. The next step then is when the paper is assigned to either the editor-in-chief or to an associate editor for further handling. As I mentioned earlier, it's not always the editor that you've requested, but the journals usually have multiple associate editors who are experts in a particular field within the broader subject area of the journal. And your manuscript will always be handled by the editor who has the highest level of understanding and experience with your paper's research area. The status will remain with editor until the editor either makes a decision or invites reviewers. So you can see then the next step, the handling editor will have different choices to make. So they may decide to make a desk reject decision, or they may decide to send the paper back to you immediately for revision, or they may also choose to invite reviewers. So the editor will conduct an initial screening of your paper and just assess it against various criteria that they have, such as novelty, priority, and scope. If your paper is a better match for another journal, then you might be offered transfer via the article transfer service. Also, it's possible that your paper does not meet some of the assessment criteria, and then the editor may reject it before sending it for peer review. If the editor decides that the paper is a good match for their journal, then they will identify 2 or 3 independent reviewers. Again, each journal is different here on the numbers of reviewers they use. And they will then send them an invitation to review the manuscript. Okay, so then when the editor invites reviewers, the status of the manuscript will change to under review. Once the required number of reviews are received and the recommendations are submitted, the status will change to required reviews complete. The handling editor will then carefully study the review reports. It might happen that the referee reports are conflicting. So you might have one reviewer that thinks that the paper should be rejected and another that thinks it should be accepted. If that was the case, for example, then the editor may need to find an additional reviewer. So when this happens, your paper may return to the under review status. So just don't be concerned if that happens. It may just be that the editor wants to get a third opinion on the paper. When the editor is happy they've received enough high quality feedback from the reviewers, they'll then begin the decision-making process and they'll move, the status will then move to decision in process. The decision may need to be confirmed by multiple editors in the chain. So sometimes if it's an associate editor who's handling your paper, they may make a recommendation and it might then move back to the editor-in-chief who then approves that recommendation. Okay, so the editor-in-chief will then submit his or her decision. You'll then see here, you might have the revised decision. The editor this basically means the editor has requested that you revise your submission. You'll find the details of any changes required and the deadline for your revision in the decision letter, as well as the comments from the editor and the reviewers. Your paper may have been accepted or rejected. At this point, the submission process has completed with either that accept or reject decision. In the case of an accept decision, the manuscript will begin its production process. So it will move to our production system and you'll receive further information about proofs and so on. You may see the status as transfer pending. So this would be where the editor has rejected your paper for their journal. However, they have suggested transfer via, as I said, the article transfer service. They may suggest transfer to another journal. So in this case, you'll receive a notification that this transfer has been offered to you, and we will then await your response on that before proceeding. And then the final status you'll see here is submission transferred. So if you accept the offer of transfer to the other journal, then this will be the submission, and you can then track the status of your manuscript at that particular journal site. We also have a video published on the submission status explainer, which will go through how your submission progresses after submitting the manuscript. And the link of that video will be shared in the chat section with you now. I also wanted to mention the submission tracker. So we have introduced a tool called the submission tracker tool, which has been introduced to more than 2,000 journals. Once a journal is using submission tracker, an email is sent to the corresponding author when the first reviewer is invited. As you can see from this screenshot, the email contains a link to the submission tracker landing page. And from here, the author can view the status of the review process of their submission. And important to note here, the same link will remain active throughout the end-to-end review process. So you'll use that same link for the whole process. And we also expect to have this submission tracker tool available to all journals in the near future. And you can see here the submission tracker landing page for submission and how this looks. And as I said, from here, you can monitor the complete status of your manuscript. Okay, I also wanted to briefly mention handling fake acceptance letters, which is a very important and timely subject here. So at Elsevier, we want to help all of our authors to stay safe when publishing. And unfortunately, we are aware that there are a number of scams in operation which seek to fraudulently obtain money from authors. Typically, these schemes take the form of emails purporting to be from a journal's editorial office, asking the authors to pay a fee. Often this request is made at the same time as announcing that the paper has been accepted for publication, even though in reality, the paper is likely still in the editorial review workflow. So just on screen now, you'll see some tips on how you can avoid being scammed and staying safe when publishing your paper. So I'll just briefly mention some of these, but the first point, just to ensure all legitimate emails from Elsevier requesting payment will come from an @elsevier.com email address. So anything other than that is not something that you should be trusting. If you're not expecting a communication or you already know the paper's at a different stage in the process, then do be wary of any emails suggesting otherwise. If the email contains any misspellings or casual or unprofessional language, or it's a different style from the emails that you usually receive from Elsevier, then these are danger signs to look out for. Very important to note, any requests for payment, especially if you've not chosen to publish in a gold open access journal, then you should be wary of any communication requesting a transfer of money. In the case of a gold open access journal, Elsevier will only ask for payment after your paper has been accepted for publication. So if you haven't received notification of that, then please do be extra cautious about that. Emails requesting payment will never be signed off as things like senior management or something like that. And always use the journal's actual submission site as per the guide for authors, the journal homepage, to complete your submission. So please don't trust external services to do this for you. Okay, just some useful pointers to please bear in mind. Okay, and then I finally wanted to talk about co-authorship verification. So when submitting your paper, authors are asked to list all of the co-authors of the submission, as we already talked about. Editorial manager journals will request the co-authors to confirm their co-authorship, as this helps to ensure that authorship includes all individuals who've made a significant contribution to the conception, design, execution, or interpretation of the manuscript. So how do I verify my contribution as a co-author? So request to verify may be a new concept to you. So it may refer to a new submission, or it might also refer to a revised submission. The journal will send co-authors an email notification, which includes some deep links to verify your co-authorship. Some journals will ask that you also register or log in to confirm your co-authorship, which will also allow you to view the status of the submission. Some journals will ask that you also register or log in to confirm your co-authorship, as I said. And you can also then view the status of that submission from the main menu under the submissions being processed folder. Depending on your journal configuration, you may also receive up to 2 reminders to verify your co-authorship. And I think I mentioned briefly already, but we also have created a video on co-author verification, which already have been shared in the chat with you. If not, you'll find that now. And I also wanted to just share information on our author guide to Editorial Manager. So the author guide is linked to from the Publishing Support Center, the Journal Article Publishing Support Center, which we saw linked to with the little question mark icon at the bottom right of the Editorial Manager screen. The link to the author guide will be provided in the chat window to you now, but this will explain in detail all of the stages that are available to you. It goes through step by step how to submit your article, and it's a really useful process to just follow through. It includes some text instructions and information, and also some short video guides as well on submitting your article. So please do take a look at that when you before you submit your paper. And also in this Did You Know corner, we're just going to have some practical guidance for writing an effective results section for a research paper. So just to mention some of these points, always use simple and clear language and avoid the use of uncertain or out of focus expressions. The findings of the study must be expressed in an objective and unbiased manner. So while it's acceptable to correlate certain findings in the discussion section, it's best to avoid over-interpreting the results. If the research addresses more than one hypothesis, then use subsections to describe the results. This prevents confusion and promotes understanding. It's important to ensure that negative results are included in this section, even if they do not support the research hypotheses. Wherever possible, use illustrations, so things like figures, tables, charts, or other visual representations to showcase the results of your research paper. And then it's important to mention these illustrations in the text, but do not repeat the information that they're covering. And finally, for statistical data, it's adequate to highlight the tests and explain their results. The initial or raw data should not be mentioned in the results section of a research paper. Thank you very much, Chandini, and thank you all. I can see we're still getting lots of questions in, which is great. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today, and thank you all very much for listening and for contributing with your questions. After the session, we will send you an email that will contain some helpful links. So we'll include the webinar recording and also some short video guides that relate directly to the topic today. So please look out for that email. You should receive that within a couple of days. Again, if you haven't had a chance yet, if you could just complete the poll, just take a moment to complete those 5 short questions, that would really help us in delivering our future webinars. And thank you very much for joining us. We'll keep the call open just while we answer the final few questions. But to the rest of you, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at one of our webinars in the future. Thank you very much.